Alright guys, big announcement. I got a haircut. Just kidding. That was a bad joke. So before we get into what this video is actually about, I want to briefly announce my new channel because I haven't really talked about it in a video before. I started a new channel a couple months ago. There's not a whole lot on it yet, but I'm going to go really hard on it this year. I'm going to be making a lot of fun, unique, creative content. The ideas that I'm coming up with on that channel are going to be really fun, and I really think you guys are going to enjoy what I'm coming out with. I'm going to be boxing my dad, this motherfucker right here. I'm filming all of the training and stuff like that, and so I'm going to be making kind of like a mini documentary about the boxing fight, and so I think that's going to be really fun. So if you don't want to miss that, then go subscribe to that channel. There's also a bunch of other ideas that I have that are going to be super fun. Now let's talk about what I'm actually here for. My new album that I've been working on for the past year or so. I started working on it in March of 2022. It's finally coming out. It's called From the Fifth Floor. This is the album cover. This is the track list. This is going to be my 6th album that I've released. I'm really proud of this album. I think it's something that's completely different than anything I've made in the past, and so I'm super excited for you guys to hear it. The first single is already out. If you guys haven't heard it already, it's on this channel. I made a cheesy little lyric video for it about a week ago or so. I asked you guys to send me questions about the album because I wanted to do a little Q&A. I've never done a Q&A before. This is kind of exciting. Did you play everything on the album? Yes and no. For this album, I did something really different than anything that I've done in the past. I used a lot of samples on this album. I kind of combined samples and live instrumentation. So the album is probably about 20% samples, 80% live instrumentation. All of like the bass, the guitars, and the synths, and some of the drums that you hear on the album, that's all played by me. But then there's also like some drum samples, there's some vocal samples, there's some other samples that are in there. Will this album be released under the Kyle Alexander Reid name or the Alexander Radio's Experiment name? It's going to be released under Kyle Alexander Reid. However, Alexander Radio's Experiment is not a dead project. If you don't know what that is, it's a name that I released one song under. I do have plans in the future to go back to that project name. I think I'm just going to use that as like an outlet to release like kind of instrumental electronic type music. This album is just, I tell a lot of like personal stories from my life, and so it just seems fitting to release it under my full name, you know? Another quick question, where can I find you? Like, where do you release your music? It's under Kyle Alexander Reid on all platforms. I currently have 5 albums out right now. There's music dating all the way back to when I was 15 years old, and it's kind of cringe. What will make this different from your previous music? Definitely the production techniques that I kind of experimented with on this. The overall sound of the album I think is very different from my other albums. A lot of my previous stuff was like very strictly like indie rock. Like this is inspired by like Built to Spill and Car Seat Headrest, and you can very clearly tell. But I think in this album I completely break away from that mold. What songs or artists played a major influence on this album? This is kind of a hard question. There wasn't really a specific artist or like even kind of genre that I think really played a lot of influence on it. I kind of just took a lot of just different pieces from music that I was listening to at the time. Like I said, like my previous stuff was very clearly inspired by like a few select artists. And while I think there is some of that inspiration on this album, I definitely took more inspiration from a wider range of genres. Like there's some like, maybe you'll hear some influence from like some post-punk bands. Like Gang of Four is probably like an influence. Black Country New Road might be an influence. And then I also took some influence from like electronic artists. Like Fortet would be an influence. Daft Punk might be an influence on this album. I just kind of like picked and I just kind of like picked different things from like different artists and genres that I was listening to at the time and that I enjoyed. What was the hardest part of making this album? Good question. Really good question, actually. The way I recorded this album was really different from my other albums, because every time I opened up an Ableton file for this album, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had nothing written out for the album. With previous projects, I would always write out like an entire song on the guitar, then record that, then build off of that. This album, I didn't have that. Every song starts with like a sample. Like that was kind of like the backbone of each song on the album. I like kind of had 2 or 3 different samples, and then I built a song off of that. And that was very hard. I don't know if any of you have tried to combine live instrumentation with sampled music, but it is very hard. I found it very difficult to do, especially on songs I'm Gonna Get There and Back to Life. Those 2 songs took me forever to figure out what I was gonna play, because I had these samples and like the samples sounded sick. I loved the way the samples sounded. I mean, I just had to figure out how to work in like a bass line or like a synth line, and so that part was very difficult for me. But I got there, and I'm very proud of how these songs sound. What's your favorite song off the album? Dude, I can't fucking answer that. It's like these songs, these are my babies. babies, you know? I can't just like pick a favorite child. But if I had to answer, I think all three of like the longer songs on the album, Halloween or Something, When the Stars Disappeared, and Back to Life, I'm very, very proud of how those songs turned out. What are the subjects you find yourself exploring in your music? Great question. This album is a concept album. For those of you that don't know, in 2020, I moved to Portland. I went there to go to college, and then I dropped out of college, continued to live in Portland for a little bit, and then I moved back to California in 2022 when I started recording this album. All the lyrics in this album kind of tell stories of my life in Portland, like moving there, meeting new people, having fun, dropping out of school, regretting life, moving back. How close was the final project to the vision that you had while making the album? And Anthony, to answer that question, I didn't have a vision. Like I stated previously, I literally opened up every Ableton file with not a fucking clue of what I was going to do. Like that was just really interesting because these songs just really developed over time as I was recording them. So there really was no vision at all. Do you have any tips for anyone making their own music? I don't know if I am quite the right guy to ask for this because I'm just a dude in his bedroom making music for fun. But if I were to give any tips, I think one, just keep fucking making music. Just keep doing it over and over and over again. It's the same thing with like any field of work, honestly. Like you'll get better and better over time if you're just making stuff and releasing it. Making stuff and releasing it. Don't hold on to stuff for too long. Get it out there, you know? And then a second piece of advice that I would give you is what I did with this album. And that's taking inspiration from different corners of music, you know? It's like, if you're trying to make something that's truly unique, take inspiration from everywhere you can and then put your own twist on it. Fucking go listen to end pieces. Tell me that doesn't sound like Built to Spill or Modest Mouse or Car Seat Headrest. Like, I took heavy inspiration from those bands, and you can definitely tell, and there's like nothing unique about that album. Where with this album, I think I can very confidently say that there is something unique there because of all the inspirations that I took from different pieces of music. And so that's my advice. If you're trying to make something that is truly unique and trying to develop your own style, then don't only look over here for inspiration. Look over here, you know what I'm saying? Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. It was really nice of you guys. You guys had some really good questions. From the Fifth Floor releases on February 19th. I hope you guys enjoy it. I cannot wait to see what you guys think of this album. This is the first time I'm releasing music when I have some sort of audience. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but also exciting at the same time. So anyone who's made it this far into the video, I really appreciate you watching. It means a lot. It really does.